Hey guys, welcome. Glad to have you guys here. All right, so I think I figured out that this is live right away. The software changed a little bit on me, so we are here and ready to go. So while we are waiting, yesterday, guys, we had 96 people that came to the live event, and so I'm going to hang out for a minute here while we kind of get an update. We started with about 16. So let's see. Who's here? Tell me where you are from and tell me what your favorite vegetable is. And yes, tomatoes qualify as a vegetable. I know they're a fruit, but you can count them as a vegetable. So tell me where you're from, and let's kind of, while we're waiting for people to show up and my viewer count to update so I know that there's plenty of people here, let's kind of go through and say hi. So we've got Andrea from Detroit, and we've got Aline, and she needs 2 acres and a back porch. You have a back porch. I wish I had a back porch. We have a patio, but no porch. Emmy from Zone 4. Combat Pro is here from Mississippi. If you guys didn't, yesterday we had a question about vine borers that I was kind of a little unsure about. Combat Pro gave an awesome answer in the comments, so you guys should go check that out. We've got people from Phoenix, Arizona. We've got Indiana, Alabama, California, Washington, Maryland, Florida, California again, West Virginia, Oklahoma City, Pittsburgh. Everybody's loving tomatoes. Upstate New York, Birmingham, Alabama. Yesterday we had people from out of the country. Come on, is there any? Oh, France. There we go. Joyce is here from France. Awesome. Central Florida. Washington. Awesome. Okay, let's see. So we are about a minute in. Oops, I forgot to set my clock here. Let's do that. So yesterday we went about 51 minutes. That was a little bit longer than I intended, but you guys had questions, and so I wanted to give you the answers. So I'm happy to do that again if we need to, but I tried to make sure that we were pretty I'm going to make sure we're pretty tight on the actual lesson today. So for those of you that are showing up from the YouTube algorithm, welcome. For everybody else that's here, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. So what this is we're doing a 5-day Plant Your Garden challenge. And the point of this challenge is we want to get your garden planted by Saturday, okay? And some of you have already started, some of you have some things in, but I had a lot of people that were saying they were struggling and you know, just lacking a little inspiration. So we're doing this challenge as kind of a kick in the tail to get us going and get our gardens planted. And so I was actually out in the garden today. Let me show you this. See if we can get this in the camera. This is our 3rd strawberry of the year, ripe strawberries. So there's a whole bunch more. We'll be harvesting a bunch here pretty soon, but we're onesie-twosying those. So I was just out a few minutes ago. I'm hardening off my tomatoes so that I can get them planted hopefully on Saturday. Although, guys, I'm probably only going to plant seeds on Saturday. I've got a lot of stuff obviously already planted. Our potatoes are in and beans and things like that, but it's going to cool off on Saturday, and I might wait until next Monday or Tuesday before I plant my tomatoes. So we'll see. Okay, so anyways, with this 5-day challenge, we're excited to get people going, and we're going to do a live video every day like this that will teach you guys a little bit of something. And yesterday we talked about seeds, and so you can go rewatch that. If you're coming in live from the YouTube algorithm and would like to join the challenge, you still can. And so there's a link in the description below that you can click on. That will take you out to the sign up page. All I need is your email address, and then you will be part of the challenge, and you'll be able to get the workbooks. We have workbooks that go along with every day. My wife AJ and one of my daughters has worked hard on these workbooks, and we weren't really planning on doing the workbooks until the day before, and so we're a little behind the ball on those. So they're like going above and beyond on these workbooks to get them done. So check those out as well. So all of that's available for you to help you get your garden planted, okay? And we also, we might as well move the slides here, and let me make myself, well, we're okay for a minute. We will do so that you guys know. I'm happy to answer questions. but the feed becomes super distracting while I'm trying to teach, and so I kind of zone it out while I'm teaching. And my assistant is in another room, and she is keeping track of questions, and so she'll post those for me over here on my other computer, and then I'll answer those questions at the end. So we'll leave 15 or 20 minutes at the end, whatever we need to take care of that. And then also we have prizes, and I'm excited about the prizes because number one, we're going to give away a few free month-long memberships to the Gardening Academy, which is our monthly membership service, which if you guys are enjoying this challenge, you're going to love the Gardening Academy. It is a lot of fun, and we've got some people that are actually in the challenge that are part of the Gardening Academy as well, so we may hear from them. But the Gardening Academy is pretty awesome, and it's a kind of a fun environment like this all the time. So hopefully you guys will be interested in joining that. But we'll have some free versions of that to give away for a few lucky people. And the seed company, it's called Honest Seed Company, and they're a relatively new, small, family-owned company, and they have generously donated a bunch of seeds. And I just actually got some communication from them a few minutes ago. We had originally planned on them giving us enough seeds to send send 4 people some packages of seeds, like 3 or 4 packages of seeds. And they just said that they've put them in the mail to me so that I can get them out to you guys on Saturday, and they sent a lot more than I was anticipating. So we may have the ability to do, 5, 6, 7, 8 people that we can send some seeds out to. So the way you enter the challenge is to do the homework, and there'll be a homework assignment for every day, and you need to either post what you did for your homework in the Facebook group, or if you're not, and I know a lot of people are not on Facebook anymore, Facebook made people mad, so if you are not on Facebook and you still want to participate in the drawing, all you need to do is email the homework to me. So you can just reply to one of the emails that I send out, and you will get credit for entering the contest there as well. Okay, and those that'll take place on Saturday. Okay, all right. So let me turn myself off for a second here so that you can see what we're going to be talking about today. So we are going to be talking today about planning your garden, and we're also going to be talking about sunny spots and how to take advantage of the sun, because it is super duper important when we are talking about growing a garden. Okay? All right, so are we ready to get started? You guys all ready? It looks like we've got 56 people here already today, so that is awesome. Washington, Sacramento, California, Northwest Georgia. Cool. A lot of people here in Nashville. All right. Awesome. Okay. So again, remember, if you've got questions, you can throw those in the feed and I'll answer them towards the end. Okay. So let's look at what we're going to cover today. So first thing we're going to talk about is starting small. That may or may not apply to some of you. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but we'll talk about getting started small. Then we're going to talk about sun requirements, and we're going to spend some time on how important the sun is and how choosing a good location is important. Then we'll talk a little bit about fixing your spot. So if you've already got a garden spot and it's not ideal, what could we do to fix it? And we went to the dramatic solution of actually selling our house and buying a new one to fix our garden spot. We're going to talk a little bit about containers, because that can be an important part of your gardening strategy, especially if you have shade problems in your garden. You may be able to use containers to kind of combat that a little bit. Then we're going to spend some time talking about crop rotation, and then we're going to do planning your garden, which that's what the homework is going to be this time, is planning our garden. Okay. All right. So I love this picture, and I think you guys, let me turn myself back off just for a second so you can see. This is our very first garden, okay? So that is a little garden that we had in West Jordan, Utah at our first home. We were still in our 20s. We had just bought this little house, had 2 kids at the time, and we put in that little garden. And now I look at it and go, wow, that was a little garden compared to what we have now. But that's a fun little garden that we had, and kind of goes along with my idea that we need to start small. So let me tell you why I think it's important that you start small. So I have been teaching either online or in person gardening classes for about 10 to 12 years now. And you would be amazed at how many times people have come up to me, especially at the live events, and have said, I am just overwhelmed. Last year, we decided we wanted to garden, and we dug up half the backyard and put in this garden, and now it's just all these weeds, and nothing's growing right, and da-da-da-da-da, and they on and on they go. And so, they'll just be overwhelmed with their garden, and it's because as a new gardener they started out too big. Okay, and that's the problem that I see a lot of gardeners have, is they want to start out too big. And so we've got some neighbors who, same thing. I taught a gardening lesson at our local church, and he came up to me and said, yeah, same thing happened to me. We dug up half our backyard, and now it's all weeds, and we're thinking about putting it back in grass. So I want you to start small, because I want you to get some experience under your belt, and I want you to have success before you really big time commit to your garden, because there's a lot that happens, and there is a learning curve. It's not rocket science. Everyone can learn how to garden, but there's work involved, and there's things that you just need to know. And so I want you to start out small. So here's my ideal. Okay, so if we've got an in-ground garden, I think a 10 by 10 or maybe a 10 by 15 foot patch is enough to start with. Okay, that is going to give you about 100 to 150 square feet. That's more than enough space to grow a few tomatoes, and then to experiment on all the other plants that you want. You're not going to feed your family with a 10 by 10 or a 10 by 15 garden, but you are going to get experience. And so I want you to plan big and think, I want this entire backyard to be garden someday. But I want you to start out small, so that you don't overwhelm yourself and really go too far overboard. If you are thinking about raised beds, I think 2 to 4 raised beds that are 4 foot by 8 foot is plenty to get started with. Again, that's going to put you right in that 100 to maybe 130, 140 square feet, depending on the dimensions of your bed. These are some of our beds. Let me turn me off for a second. These are some of our raised beds. These pictures were taken the year that we actually put them in, so this is about 6 years ago. But we actually, because we're in our 50s, or I'm in my 50s now, and these beds should last us for 15 or 20 years, I decided to go a little bit smaller, so they're 3 by 8, because when I'm in my 60s, I don't want to have to be stretching all the way across a 4 foot bed, if that makes sense. But I think, if you're going to start with raised beds, 2 to 4 is a good way to start. And again, you're going to be able to grow quite a bit and get some good experience there. Containers, let me turn this off because this is kind of fun. My wife AJ did this a couple of years ago. We grew a little bean trellis, kind of teepee thing. Containers, if you are going to be doing containers, then I think if you're just starting out, 5 to 10 large containers is probably a good place to start. So when I say large, I'm meaning, a big 5-gallon bucket or the equivalent thereof if you're going to go with something, more official. I think 5 to 10 of those is going to be good for you. Now, containers are a whole different ballpark, and we're going to talk about containers here in a minute. But I still, I have 25 years of gardening experience under my belt now, and I still struggle with containers. And my biggest problem with containers is watering. I'm used to watering my garden every 3 or 4 days, and I cannot get watering every day into my schedule. I just don't know what it is. I put alarms on my phone and everything, and I always struggled with containers. So whole new thing there. And so I don't want you going out and getting 20 containers and totally covering your back patio until you've got a little experience under your belt. Okay. Oh wait, one more thing I want to talk about before we move on is I've heard it suggested that you should start with a very few varieties. So maybe just start with 2 or 3 varieties and gain experience, grow those for a couple years, and then move on. I like that idea, but it also feels too slow to me, if that makes sense. So I think you ought to start out with 10 to 15 varieties, some of your favorite that you're going to grow the most, and then and then move along from there. Okay? All right, so now let's talk about location. It's all about location, just like real estate, right? Most fruits and vegetables are going to prefer to grow in what we call full sun. Okay, so full sun means 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day, and more than that is preferable. Okay, so everybody always says full sun for vegetables, and then the definition, technical definition, is 6 to 8 hours, but really they would like to have more than that. Okay, so here's a great example, and I talked about the fact that we moved. This is the garden at our old place, and I apologize, it's not a great camera picture. I wasn't doing the website at this time yet, and so I didn't have a really fancy camera, but see that big shadow? So the fence there is actually on the south side of that garden, and we didn't put this garden in. It was already there, and it was kind of hardscaped into our landscape at this place, and we had a huge yard. It was a half an acre, but this was the only spot for the garden, and the problem was it was right next to that fence, and our neighbors had planted some pine trees, which when we moved in wasn't a big deal. But by the time we got about 5 years in, those 5 pine trees that lined that fence shadowed our garden. And this was actually a good day. You know, in the spring and the fall, you couldn't even, I mean, there wasn't any sun on the garden at all. And so sun is just so important for success in vegetable gardening. It just absolutely has to be. Okay, so let's look at sunshine definitions. So this, guys, I love the fact that we're giving each other advice in the chat section and everything. That's awesome. I see all kinds of fun comments going on. So thanks. That's awesome. I hope you guys are enjoying that. Okay, let's talk about definitions of sunshine. So when you get a plant tag, or when you look at the back of a seed package, not all seed packages, but some, they'll give you a definition. They'll say plant in full sun, or part shade, or something like that, okay? This is the actual technical definitions of that, okay? Full sun means minimum 6 to 8 hours. And in the case of all fruits and vegetables, they would prefer even more than that if you can get it, okay? That's the bare minimum for you to be successful, is 6 to 8 hours. Now, there are a few plants that we'll talk about that can go under that level, but for the most part, especially for the fruiting plants, so tomatoes, peppers, beans, squash, all of those, they need 8 hours or more of sunlight, okay? So full sun, okay? Part sun means 4 to 6 hours, and there are plants that can grow in part sun. Now, the one specific thing about part sun, when you read it on a tag, part sun means that the sun comes in the evening, so that's why I put PM on there. Part sun is 4 to 6 hours in the afternoon, because the afternoon sun is more intense than morning sun, and so plants that require part sun require more sun than those that require part shade, which part shade is the same thing, 4 to 6 hours, but that sunshine is in the morning, okay? And that's a less intense sun. And then full shade means 4 hours or less of sun, but it doesn't mean complete darkness. There's still going to be some sun coming, because anything that says full shade is going to need at least a little bit of sun, but just no more than 4, okay? All right, so that's our definitions. All fruits and vegetables are going to be the most successful in 6 to 8 hours of sunlight or more. Things like leafy greens, so lettuce, spinach, kale, maybe even collards to some extent, can grow in kind of that part sun, part shade category. Beans and peas can get away with the lower end of full sun, so about 6 hours. But everything else really needs to be in more sun. So if it fruits, it's got to have a lot of sun. Leafy greens can do with less. And in the workbook, guys, I did kind of a breakdown of all the different crops and what absolutely has to have bright sunlight, what can get away with a little bit less. So check out your workbooks for a little bit more of a definition on that, okay? Yeah, Sarah says she didn't know the thing about the AM and the PM thing. I actually only recently, within the last 6 months or so, learned that as well. So part sun and part shade are actually different things. Part sun is in the afternoon, part shade is in the morning. So yeah, I thought that was interesting when I learned it. Okay, all right. So can you fix your spot? So you've got a spot, and maybe it's not getting as much sunshine as you want it to get, what can we do to fix it? Okay, so here's a few ideas. Remove trees or tree limbs. Okay, it's amazing how much shade a little tree can cause in a garden, especially if it's on the south or the west side of that garden. So never, if you're planting on a vegetable garden, you never want to plant any trees on the south, and you never want to plant any trees on the west, okay? Because that's going to block your afternoon sun and your daytime sun. So if you can remove some trees, that would be a good thing. Avoid sheds and buildings. So if you want to put a garden shed in your garden, then if you live in the northern hemisphere, it should be on the north end of your garden, okay? Not on the south, because it will cast a shadow on your garden. Adding containers to your garden can help a ton, because we can it's easier to put those guys in the sun. So you don't have full sun in your garden, maybe you can add some big containers on your deck that does get full sun to grow your tomatoes or your peppers, or things like that. Or you can move, which is what we did. So we ended up, and that wasn't the only reason why we moved. We were tired of taking care of a half an acre, so we actually downgraded to a quarter of an acre, and now we actually, on the quarter of an acre, we have a bigger garden. We have more garden space on the quarter of an acre than we did on the half acre. So that's always a solution. You could move. Okay, growing in containers. Now I've talked about the containers a little bit. We're going to talk more tomorrow about the soil in containers, but I did want to talk just a bit about containers so that as you're doing your planning tonight, because tonight our homework is going to be to plan our garden out. So I wanted to talk just a bit about containers and give you guys a few tips here. So first, my biggest tip, and there's in the workbook, there's like 10 tips. I just highlighted 4 for the lesson today so that we didn't go through all of them. But my biggest tip is bigger is always better with containers. Okay, so the biggest container that you can afford or come up with, the better. Somebody had a great idea in the comment section of yesterday's video, because I talked about the fact that we need to make sure that our containers are food safe, or that they've never been used to hold dangerous chemicals. I don't want you using oil drums or tires or things like that to grow in. Somebody had a great idea, and it was go to a bakery. Bakeries use big 5-gallon food safe buckets all the time, and they're often quite happy to give them away. And then all you would need to do is put some drainage holes in them, which drainage holes are very important in containers. You need to make sure that they have drainage holes. And but having big containers, especially if the plant you're growing has a big top, it needs a big bottom, okay? Because it needs to have the support of a big heavy container, and it also needs the space for the roots. So you're not going to grow a tomato successfully in a 12-inch container. It needs to be in a 5-gallon pot, okay? Because it needs that root space. So the bigger is always better. You can get away with growing things like lettuce or maybe a few carrots or radishes or things like that in smaller containers, but most things you're going to want to be in bigger containers. Herbs will do well in small containers too. You need to plan on watering every day. And that's my big problem, is watering every day. Containers almost always, especially in the summertime, are going to need water every day, unless you live somewhere that's really rainy, okay? So you need to plan on that. Buy a quality potting mix, okay? So you get what you paid for, and a cheap potting mix is not going to have it's going to be full of really rough ingredients, and it's just not going to do what you want. So spend the money. If you need to go get free containers from the bakery or whatever, great. Spend your money on good quality potting soil. And then if you amend that potting soil every year with some compost, then you should be in pretty good shape. And we're going to talk a lot more about compost tomorrow, but you can make that potting soil last for several years before you have to throw it out. So make sure that you do that. And then remember, containers, unlike gardens, so I feel like my garden, for the most part, doesn't need fertilizer. My soil is healthy enough. I amend it with compost every year. I do trench composting. I do everything that I can to keep that soil healthy. And I don't feel like it needs fertilizer. And my plants are proving that. They do well without fertilizer. But in containers, that's not something you're going to be able to get away with. So you have to plan on fertilizers. And if you're organic and you're worried about chemical fertilizers. There are a lot of organic, natural fertilizers available out there. Anything from fish emulsion to vegetable scraps that have been turned into fertilizers. So there's a lot of options out there, but you definitely need to make sure that you are fertilizing often with your containers. Okay. All right, planting your garden, and I'm not sure, I actually made this slide last night, and I hopefully you guys can see this is a little map. So it's a grid there for you guys to plan, and we actually have that in the workbook. And I want you, for your homework tonight, we are actually going to plan out our gardens. We're going to map out what we're going to plant on Saturday so that we have everything ready to go. Okay, so let me take a drink, and then we'll talk about a couple of things. We're going to cover crop rotation, and then we will be done for the thing. And it looks like we already have 4 or 5 questions. So, all right, let's talk about crop rotation. And the reason why I put crop rotation first is because I want you to start thinking about it now in your planning. Even if this is your first year, I want it in your brain, okay? So the email that I sent this morning, I didn't want to, we're not going to take a million years here. The email that I sent this morning has a link out to 3 different articles that I've written, and 2 of them include some additional video as well to help you learn a little bit more about crop rotation. But the general idea of crop rotation is that crops have families. Those families are related, and they all, those related families all are susceptible to the same pests. They're susceptible to the same diseases, and they use the same nutrients. So everything in the tomato family, peppers, tomatoes, eggplant, even potatoes, they all use those same nutrients. They all have the same disease issues. And so we want to make sure that we're not planting the tomato family in the same place every year, okay? And so we need to rotate it and move it around, rotate that location every year. So the best plan that you can come up with would be a plan that keeps you from planting in the same spot for 4 years, okay? So we want to avoid planting in the same spot for 4 years if you possibly can. And so I like to, in some way or another, quadrant my garden. So our main garden happens to have 4 beds that we plant vegetables in, and it has one that's kind of a catch-all, and then another that's raspberries. And then we have 4 raised beds as well. And so I quadrant everything so that I can rotate for over 4 years. And then I make sure in my planning that everything that I'm not planting crops of the same family in the same place for 4 years, if I can possibly avoid it. Now, if you're really big on potatoes and you grow a lot of potatoes, that becomes just a little bit tricky because, better than a third of our garden is occupied with tomatoes. And so sometimes we have with potatoes. So sometimes we have a little bit of a hard time rotating the potatoes as much as we could, but we do our very best to make sure that at least every 2 or 3 years we're rotating through. But 4 years is your ultimate best, okay? And this reduces pests, reduces diseases, and it also helps with the nutrients because, again, for example, corn is a heavy feeder, which means it sucks the nitrogen out of the soil. And so if you plant corn in the same spot year after year after year, it's going to cause you problems because the soil is going to become depleted, and then your corn's just not going to do as well. So if you rotate and you get some beans or some peas in there, then it's going to replenish the soil and do things like that, okay? And then remember, check today's email because, again, there's so much information on crop rotation. We could literally do a whole course on crop rotation. And so, check today's email because there's a lot of additional information in that email. And again, for those of you who are, look, we're up to 96, almost 100 viewers again. Maybe we can break the 100 viewer mark. For those of you that aren't part of this challenge and didn't get the email this morning, all you need to do is sign up down in the description below, and I'll send out this morning's email again later this afternoon because yesterday we had like 40 people sign up after the fact, and I'll do the same thing again today. And so if you want to join the challenge and get this other information, just sign up, and you'll be on the email list, and I'll send it out to you. Okay. All right. Let's see what else do we have here. A few other planning considerations for you. I love succession planting. Okay, and I also kind of let intercropping fall into that same category. I saw over here in the questions or the comments that we were talking a little bit about interplanting. So succession and interplanting I kind of consider kind of in the same category. Basically, the idea is we want to get more than one crop out of the same space in a year. So a great example is lettuce. Okay, so if we start with lettuce, the lettuce is going to be done probably in June, May, depends on where you live. You know, our lettuce is just now coming on, and we'll have about a month worth of lettuce, and then it will kind of shift, and we will plant something else in that space, like beans. Okay, so we'll plant some beans there, and then those beans will be done in, you know, 65 to 70 days, and we can replant again with, say, spinach or lettuce again, or, you know, something like that. And that succession planting allows us to get a lot more harvest out of our little space. And you guys, if you get to know me at all, you'll know that I love fall for gardening. Okay, fall is the ignored garden season. There's an entire other season in the fall, and so plan your garden accordingly, because we're already into the summer for most of us. So I want you guys to think about your summer garden in your planning, and then your fall garden this year. What can you plant here and then replace there? Okay, or what could you plant if you're going to plant tomatoes? Is there something you could plant underneath them? Maybe you could plant some lettuce and still get, you know, a 30-day harvest of lettuce before those tomatoes are up and big. So I want you to plan on succession planting. Then I also want you to think about the end size of the plant. Okay, and I just say that because I sometimes see people who make plans and they don't anticipate how big their zucchini plant is going to get, or how much space their pumpkins are going to occupy. Okay, so keep that in mind. You know, the in size of the plant is important. The other thing I want you to do is I want you to add some flowers to your garden. I'm a big fan, and I'm becoming an even bigger fan of adding flowers to my vegetable garden. And the reason why, whether they're edible or not, is I want them to be there attracting beneficial insects. So they are going to, you know, flowers of different types are going to attract different pollinators. That's going to help with my squash and my tomatoes and, you know, all of those kind of things. And the other thing that it will do is you know, some plants are going to attract beneficials, and other plants are going to repel plants that they don't like. Or insects that don't like them, and then some will become a trap. Like nasturtium is a great trap for aphids and some other plants, because they really like them, and so that keeps them away from some of your other crops. So that is something that I would really like you to consider. Even if you don't have, you know, you can just plant some seeds out there. When you plant your regular seeds, throw in some flower seeds, or you can go to the nursery and buy some. This year I've got a couple of big flats of marigolds and zinnias that are actually intended not for the flower beds but for the garden. So get some flowers in your garden. Okay, then I want you to think about the sun in the bed itself, the individual bed. So if you've got a raised bed, I want you to remember when you're planting, if you're putting in a tomato plant, hey, look at that, guys. Sorry, I stopped my thought. 104 viewers. That's the most I've ever had on a live stream. That's awesome, guys. Thanks for being here. Anyways, back to the sun in the bed. If you've got a tomato plant, you need to make sure that you put the tomato plant on the north side of your bed so that it doesn't shade everything else. So if you put it on the south side of your bed and then plant something behind it, as that tomato plant gets bigger and bigger, or your corn, or, you know, broccoli or something like that, it's going to shade those other plants and then slow or stunt the growth of those other plants. So think about that when you're doing your planting. Then the last thing, which kind of contradicts number 2, is ignore the spacing rules. Okay, so if you look at the back of your seed packages, there's going to be some spacing guidelines, and those guidelines for the most part are pretty antiquated. Okay, they're based on 1960s and 70s gardening fashion, which was long rows and easy to cultivate and all that kind of stuff, or it's based on farming practices, one way or the other. Okay, I want you to ignore those for the most part. Now, obviously, a tomato or a winter squash needs a lot of space. Okay, but when we're talking about lettuce or spinach or carrots or beans, anything like that, even like cucumbers that are on a trellis, you can ignore the spacing requirements on those plants and plant them a whole bunch closer than what it says, okay? Now, I'm not saying cram them in together. You know, carrots need a couple of square inches, which is about like that, okay? So you don't want to cram them really close together because then the carrots aren't going to grow well. But the spacing guide on your carrot package is going to be way spaced out further than what you actually really need. So I want you to ignore those rules completely, okay? All right, so that is our lesson for today. Let me turn me off for a second here so that you guys can see our homework assignment. Okay, today's homework, I want you to plan your garden. And there is in your workbook, there is a grid paper. It's actually this one that's here on the sheet, but it's a little bit hard to see. I didn't realize how white things were. I should have made a darker background there. But there is some graph paper that you can plan your garden on, and you can print as many copies of that as you want or need. And I want you to plan your garden for me, and then I want you to take a picture of that, and you can turn that in, and that would be credit for the prizes. Also, I want you to snap a before picture of your garden, okay? And this is mainly for you because, you know, I want you to see what it's like. I like to plant, you know, this picture here is of my garden very, very early in the spring. And I like to see the contrast. And so snap a picture of your garden. I love to see people's gardens anyways. And either one of those, your plan or a photo of your garden uploaded in the Facebook group is qualification for the prizes. Okay, so upload those. Now, if you don't do Facebook, and I know that some people are pretty mad at Facebook right now, so if you don't do Facebook, I'm not going to penalize you for that, but I do want you to still turn in the homework because I want to know that you're engaged and that you're doing it. So shoot me an email. You can just reply to the email that I sent this morning and shoot me an email with your homework in it, and that will enter you as well. And so one of my assistants is actually, when I say assistants, it's all my kids, but one of my assistants is actually tracking the entries there so that we can make sure that we know everybody that turned in their homework so we can get entered, because it sounds like we're going to have maybe as many as 10 to 12 groups of seeds and free subscriptions and things like that we're going to give away on Saturday. So your chances in a group of 300 are actually pretty good. So you should turn those in. Okay, all right, questions. So we'll do some questions, and it looks like I already have quite a few here. Let me take a drink. We're 35 minutes in, and I am going to try and get these taken care of in about 10 minutes. Okay, so my daughter is posting questions here. So first off, where do we share the homework? She tried to post on the homework page and it never showed up. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what happened there, technical problem. Again, email it to me. If you can't get it to post on the Facebook page, email it to me. I know that it's working because a ton of people last night posted. I mean, we've already had like 30 or 40 people in the Facebook group that have posted their homework assignment from yesterday. So yeah, it should be working. If it doesn't work, if you absolutely can't get it to work, email it to me and we'll count it. You know, we're keeping track of everybody that emails as well. So you'll get entered. Okay? Cheryl wants to know what herbs grow in part shade. So actually quite a few herbs will do okay in part shade. So I'm trying to think, you know, the perennial herbs, so things like rosemary and stuff like that probably aren't going to do very well. I have chives that are in part shade, almost full shade, and they do really, really well. Parsley does well in the shade. Basil probably needs a little more sun. It would kind of be on the outer edge. That's 6 hours. But most of your herbs are probably going to do okay because they're kind of like a leafy green. And so, you know, most of those herbs should do really well. Yeah, here Combat Pro is saying rosemary, mint, basil, thyme, all of those should do. So I think for the most part, I can't really think of an herb that isn't going to do okay. You know, I mean, it's not going to do amazing. It would do better in full sun, but you know, if you've got part shade, use it up and do things like that. So that's great question. Should part sun be directed sun, or can it have some reflected light? So those definitions that we have, and by the way, those definitions are also in the workbook, so you've got them there as well. But those definitions are not reflective sun. Okay, those are actual sun on the plants. Okay, so if a plant says it needs part sun, it needs direct sunlight for that amount of time, either in the AM or the PM, depending on which it is. Let's see, part sun is in the afternoon, part shade is in the morning. So yeah, reflected light doesn't count with those. Okay, Combat Pro says, what about growing inside of a loop of fencing with weed fabric inside of it? Boy, Combat Pro, email me. I'm not sure I understand the question. So let's yeah, or extrapolate here a little bit. I'm not sure I'm following you. So do that. Okay, I just saw a question here. It's not on the Stoney Acres page where we're submitting the homework. We're submitting the homework on the challenge page. It's actually not a page, it's a group. So it's the challenge group. So there's a link to that group in the email that I sent you. Any of the emails that I've sent you should have that. So that's where you submit it. So it's in the group, not the page. So maybe that's the problem. If you're trying to upload it on the Stoney Acres page, that Facebook won't let you upload to a page. So so you need to go to the 5-day challenge, gardening challenge group. And if you haven't joined that group yet, just ask for access and that'll get you in there. Okay. All right. So Janet says, if you plant it says, if you plant a guild, does that make a more balanced soil demand so that you don't need... I'm not sure I understand again, Janet. I'm sorry. So if you want to contact me via email, I'm happy to help you with that, but I'm not sure I understand that question. How successful was the crop I planted on the bean trellis in the container system? I don't have room in my garden for beans, and I thought the idea was interesting. So we had an okay success with that, but we have a problem watering. Okay, and so if you are dedicated enough to be out there and watering every day, our lifestyle just doesn't lend itself to watering our garden every day. We are just crazy everywhere. I mean, we still have teenagers in the house, and so we have a hard time. Now, last year, I put all of those pots that you saw, I put them right next to the faucet and planted them with another crop. And that was the best year we've ever had because they were right by the faucet, so it was easy. So you shouldn't have any problems. We got a pretty decent harvest, but they struggled because, again, we hadn't watered as well as we should have. So that is a great idea, and I've seen a million people very successful with it, and our biggest struggle is just watering. So it's just terrible I don't have a problem watering my main garden because it's all on a drip system and I know when to water it, but containers just kill me. Okay, Andrea says, I don't think my garden will allow me to change each year. Can you do something to my garden to amend it? I'm mostly interested in planting tomatoes. Okay, so Andrea, you must be in a community garden, and yeah, that's unfortunate. And so the only thing that I can recommend for you to do there is just make sure that you are taking care of your soil. And tomorrow, make sure you check in for tomorrow's because we are going to talk about taking care of your soil. But yeah, that's the only thing that you can do. And then plant disease-resistant varieties. So people will hate me for this, but you may want to not plant heirloom tomatoes. And it depends. There are a few heirloom tomatoes that are disease resistant as well. But that's the thing that you're going to need to watch out for, is that you're going to have a buildup of disease problems, blight and verticillium wilt and things like that. And some of the hybrid varieties are more resistant to those. So plant resistant varieties and then just do your best to take care of the soil. So you're going to make sure you put compost in every year. In that scenario, I probably would be softer on the fertilizer as well, and maybe you could put some fertilizer in and do your best there, okay? Okay, what are companion plants other than marigold and nasturtium? Okay, both of those are real powerful companion flowers. I like sunflowers because they attract pollinators really well. they're not as friendly to some plants though, so you have to be careful with those. Zinnia are a really nice one to put in the garden. Really flowers are not gonna conflict with many plants, and so anything you like. I mean, I don't think I would plant pansies or petunias. They're not going to be attractive enough. Their blossoms are nice, but they're not showy. But anything that's really showy is going to attract things. Even like we've got some kale that we overwintered that went to seed, and I was out there the other night and the hummingbirds were hanging out in the kale plants. So big, flashy, bright colored yellows, oranges, reds, all of those are going to be really good for your garden. Okay. Under a tree, would it be considered part sun? The only way to determine that is to measure the sun. So you need to go out and pay attention for a day and see, how much sun is there. So depending on how dense the tree canopy is, there probably is still some sun. But if there's no sun getting in there, then it's going to be shade. It's going to be considered full shade, and so most likely under a tree, unless it's a tree that has the ability for there to be south sun exposure, then maybe the south side of that tree might still have part sun. I've got a tree in our garden that's part sun, that gets plenty of sun all day long, except for in the very, very late afternoon and the early morning. So yeah, the only way to know that is to measure it. Okay. Shauna wants to know, peppers like dry soil. Is that correct? It looks like part of your question got cut off. Peppers don't like to be like soaking wet all the time, but they still want, like tomatoes and like most plants, they want a nice consistent moisture. So you're going to use the finger test. You're going to stick your finger in the ground, and if it's wet to your fingertip, everything's okay. If it's not, if it's dry, then it's time to water. Okay. Okay, somebody says, if I just built a bed and you just filled it, and the rest of your garden is already up and running, can you join? Absolutely. We've got people that are in the group that have already planted their gardens but just wanted to be here for fun. So yeah, I'd love to have you. You can join. No requirements like that. Okay, I am a container gardener, and I noticed that my veggies get white hard stuff on top. What is it, and how can I remove it? Without seeing it, I'm not sure. So send me an email, and we'll take a look and see what we can come up with. So I'm not 100% sure. White stuff on top. Yeah, without seeing it, I'd have to. So let's see. It's Diamonds here that asked that question. Yeah. Just shoot me an email, and we'll see what we can do. Okay. All right. I think that's the end of the questions, and we still have 90 people here, so looks like we're about 47 minutes. So let's wrap it up, I think. So reminders for you. Tomorrow is soil care. So we're going to talk about taking care of our soil. We'll especially talk about compost and how important that is, and adding compost to your garden is. So make sure that you check out that. And if you haven't signed up for the challenge yet, then that is down in the description below, and you can click on that. The other thing I did want to bring up and just mention, because we've had just a lot of fun stuff happening here. If you guys like this fun challenge environment and being able to interact with other people and ask questions, then I would encourage you to check out the Gardening Academy as well. And I'll talk a lot more about the Gardening Academy on Saturday, but I think you would really love the Gardening Academy. So take a look at that as well, and you can check that out at thegardeningacademy.com. So, okay, I think, my friends, that is it for today. We'll call it a wraps, and yeah, this was fun. So tomorrow we should have another fun time. So make sure you do your homework, get it turned in, and I will talk to you guys in the morning in the email, and then we'll have another session like this tomorrow at 12:30. Okay, thanks, guys. You are awesome. I appreciate you guys being here. Thanks. Happy gardening, guys.